The morbid Dane illustrates the dialectical difficulties, the evaporation of one truth into another. And of course you've heard this in your studies of theology, I hope at any rate. The virgin birth was true in the 1st century, but it's not true today, and this, that, and the other thing was true in the 5th century, and it's not true today, and what is true today won't be true next century, and so on and so on. The morbid Dane illustrates the dialectical difficulties, the evaporation of one truth into another, both as they occur in Romanism, with its ultimate appeal to the church, and in Protestantism, with its ultimate appeal to the Bible. The latter was as comical as Don Quixote. Its passion was good, but its object was wrong. The first dialectical difficulty with the Bible is that it is an historical document, and the resulting troubles have already been mentioned. You can't trust historical documents. To avoid them, Romanism appeals to the church. The church is not an historical document. It is a present reality that needs no proof. Yet the Romanists claim that the present church is the apostolic church. Therefore, questions of history are not avoided. Historical proof is needed, and the approximation process begins over again. It would be necessary to prove historically the primitive and apostolic character of the Council of Trent and of the church as a whole in every movement through 18 centuries, where criticism will stumble on difficulties that the Bible theory never knew. End of quote. A person who bases his eternal happiness on the church is as comic as Don Quixote. Not because of his passion, that is good, but because the objectivity of the church theory is incommensurable with his interest. Here, let us pause to catch our breath. The argument on historical research is acutely embarrassing to that type of apologetics which is chiefly Lutheran and is best exemplified by my good friend, what's his name? John Warwick Montgomery. To that type of apologetics and prolegomena that tries to prove various Christian theses by archaeology or historical investigation. It is impossible by historical methods to prove beyond all doubt that Jesus was crucified. And incidentally, I have written a book of some pages on historiography, secular and religious, and you can guess the main thesis of it. It's anti-empirical, and if you want to read the details of my historiography, you'll find them in that book. But we can't do everything in these 3 weeks. The days may be long, but 3 weeks are terribly short. It is impossible by historical methods to prove beyond all doubt that Jesus was crucified. Even if the crucifixion be probable, though what probability means is not easily... These people that talk about probability apparently have no notion of what probability means. You all, of course, did I use this example before? You all, of course, know how to shoot craps, and you know what the probability of throwing 12 is, or the probability of throwing 7, and you know what probability is. But if you talk about the probability of some historical event, you just have no even a vague idea of what probability is. What's the numerator of it? What's the denominator of it? And the people refuse to face these problems. They prefer to be vague and meaningless. Even if the crucifixion be probable, though what probability means is not easily explained, empirical history could never prove that his death, now assumed to be historical accuracy, was a propitiatory sacrifice. And without this latter belief, the former cannot save. But such difficulties as these do not embarrass any Christian who rejects empirical methodology. The impossibilities that attach to sensation and memory, in all instances, naturally attach also to the case in the case of history. Besides, history has further difficulties of its own. Kierkegaard, therefore, seems to be justified in repudiating empirical historical methodology, though he may be quite mistaken in thinking that this eliminates historical events from religion. One must not minimize nor extenuate Kierkegaard's skepticism. He makes the point quite clear, quote, "The positive in the sphere of thought comes under the head of certainty in sense perception, in historical knowledge, and in speculative results. But all this positiveness is sheer falsity. The certainty afforded by sense perception is a deception, as one may learn from a study of the Greek skeptics, and from the entire treatment of this subject in the writings of modern idealism, which is very instructive. The positiveness of historical knowledge is illusory, since it is approximation knowledge. The speculative result is a delusion. Reason is as illusory as sensation. Scattered throughout his writings are various attacks on reason or rationality. For example, reason cannot begin. It entails an infinite regress. If everything must be reasoned out, there can be no unreasoned first premise. Hence, reason cannot begin. This line of argument may or may not have some force against Euclid or Spinoza, but the objection sounds much more formidable when directed against Hegel. Quote, "The system, so it is said, begins with the immediate, hence without any presuppositions, and hence absolutely. The beginning of the system is an absolute beginning. But how does the system begin with the immediate? Does it begin with it immediately? The answer to this question must be an unconditional negative. If the system is presumed to come after existence, then the system is, of course, ex post facto, and so does not begin immediately with the immediacy with which existence began. Although in another sense it may be said that existence did not begin with the immediate, since the immediate never is as such, but is transcended as soon as it is. The beginning which begins with the immediate is thus itself reached by means of a process of reflection." He is accusing Hegel of self-contradiction. Kierkegaard regards this as a fatal objection to Hegelianism, and he takes the opportunity to point up its application to the existing individual. If reflection has no first premise, no conclusion, and can never end, the professor can never become a human being. No conclusion particularly means no decision. The professor cannot decide to stop reflecting and go to dinner. In order to act, a human being must stop reasoning. To act is to break through reflection in an arbitrary act of will. Kierkegaard, however, is not destructive and negative only. He obviously is an advocate of something. This advocacy and this something require attention.